Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Coaching Union podcast. Today, I'm delighted to welcome our guest, my college coach and mentor, Casey Crook, who just wrapped up a career of 32 years as the head coach of the Long Beach City College Vikings. Coach Crook shares the wisdom only time can teach, reflecting on how the game has changed, the role of a baseball coach and educator, and what it means to hold on to the rope for the people around you. From the importance of great assistant coaches to the art of building trust with your teams, this conversation is a masterclass in coaching philosophy. Remember, I offer one-to-one player and coach development programs for anyone who wants to grow their game. Just reach out to me at thecoachingunion@gmail.com. Without further ado, here's episode 11 with Casey Crook. Coach Crook, welcome to the Coaching Union podcast.
Thanks for having me, Johnny.
Yeah, it's an honor, Coach. For those of you who don't know, Coach Crook was my coach in college, and then became my mentor and got me into the coaching world. So it's quite the honor, Coach. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the kind words.
Tell us a little bit about your journey through baseball, how you got into coaching.
Oh man, I almost kind of stumbled into it. I don't think when I was in college I was sure I wanted to be a baseball coach, or I wasn't even thinking college baseball coach. To tell you the truth, I majored in math. I did my student teaching in math at a public high school in Sioux City, Iowa, thinking I was going to be a high school math teacher. And at the end of student teaching, I thought to myself, I don't ever want to be a high school math teacher. So I was also working on a degree in physical education. And then I thought about coaching. I contacted a coach I knew who at the time was coaching at Long Beach State in California. And he convinced me to move to California. I went to Long Beach and got into grad school to work on my master's, and was fortunate enough to be a volunteer coach for Dave Snow led teams there in the early 90s. And then I think that's when I decided this is what I want to do. And I was fortunate enough to go make a living out of it after that at Long Beach City College.
Which you've just wrapped up. You've just retired after 32 years, correct?
32 years as the head coach. I've decided to step away from coaching. I am tenured faculty at the junior college here, so I'm going to teach for a little while longer before I retire. But yeah, it was time. It just hit me right between the eyes about halfway through the season. I just realized I don't know if I can put the same energy and passion into this. And if that happens, I just thought it wasn't good for me, and it wasn't good for the school, and it wasn't good for the program, and it wasn't good for the players. So there's a little bit of bittersweetness in this decision. But yeah, I was telling you early, no real regrets. 95%, I'm just really happy with the decision. I'm ready to move forward.
32 years, Coach. I can't stay in one place for 3 years, let alone 32. So 32 years of commitment, dedication, service to the college and to the community it's just an incredible accomplishment. And I'm lucky that I was able to be a part of it. And you were where I ended up sending a letter to Long Beach City College in 2004.
Was it a letter, not an email?
Well, it was 2004, Coach. It was a letter. It was a letter. And at the time I had the best batting average in Orange County. So I bought a bunch of newspapers and I cut out the actual clippings and taped them on. And
Man.
Yeah.
And then after you came into our program, you recruited some key components of the lineup that helped us end up winning that state championship while you were there. I think you started coaching when you were still playing because you were already recruiting.
I brought my friends with me, and yeah, it was a good time. We'll get into all that, especially the 2016. But going back to your baseball career, Sioux City, Iowa. I think I know the answer, but what were you doing out there for our listeners?
Well, I grew up in the Northwest, and I actually started playing. I redshirted at Washington State University, and I realized that I probably wasn't good enough to get a lot of playing time at a Division I school. So one of the coaches from back there that I had worked with got the coaching job at Briarcliff College in Sioux City, Iowa. And he recruited me to go there. And it was a good decision. Because I got to play a lot, and I have a lot of great memories of that. And it's a small school, so academically, it was just easier to work your way through that and finish all of that up also. So that's how I ended up in Sioux City, Iowa.
Do you still hold the triples record?
I think when I left, I held a bunch of records, but most of those are gone. I think maybe triples and stolen bases, maybe I still have, but a lot of that other stuff, yeah, guys have blown past them.
Oh, triples and stolen bases, that's all right. You must have been flying.
I could run a little bit, and I had that slow bat, so I slapped a lot of balls down the right field line.
It was the flares. It was scooted away from the right fielder. Got
Right,
caught in the bullpen.
right.
Nice, nice. Coach, so after you're playing, you mentioned that you went to Long Beach State and coached under Dave Snow. For the listeners that might not be familiar with Dave Snow, legendary coach at Long Beach State, took Long Beach State to Omaha a few times, had some really good teams, really gritty, a legend.
Was one of the iconic college baseball coaches of the 90s. Not the only one, but he nationally known and iconic for that time in college baseball.
So especially the time that you were there, what years exactly were you at Long Beach State?
So I would have helped coach. And when I say help coach, I threw batting practice in the cages and kept charge during the games. I wasn't in charge of anything. I was like the helper for the assistant coaches that were in charge of things. So I'm not let's not make this sound like I was an integral part of any of Dave Snow's seasons, but um, I think that would have been the 91 and 92 seasons. And then that was the 92 was the year that the NCAA made a bunch of rules, and you couldn't have just as many volunteer coaches as wanted to be there, and you couldn't spend as much time running practices and with the players. So actually at the end of the 92 season, I had to leave their program because there was a limit on how many coaches, volunteer or not, could be associated with the program. And I was lucky enough that a couple of the assistant coaches who were working at Long Beach State at the time took me over to Long Beach City College and told the head coach there, Lindsey Meggs, who ended up having a great Division I career, that they ought to hire me to be his assistant coach. So I got to I think I did the outfielders and hitting and coached third base, some of the hitting, and then and after 1 year, that's when Lindsey Meggs got his first NCAA job at Chico State. And back in those days, you just kind of slid me over as the part-time interim coach, and then it grew into 32 years.
What a way to get in, to be between Dave Snow and Lindsey Meggs. What were some of the things that you took away that prepared you to take over at Long Beach City College from the Dave Snow environment?
I wish I'd have paid more attention. Here's a story. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, John, but the first game, I'm the head coach at Long Beach City College. The game's at home, and we got the pinstripes on, and everybody's excited, and I'm hitting infield, outfield, and I see Coach Snow standing behind the backstop watching. He was genuinely excited for me, and he was genuinely excited for all his players and coaches that moved on to better things, and he was there. I got done with the infield, outfield, and he called me over to the backstop and said, "Hey, Crook, that was all wrong," as he pointed to the field. And I felt like he was saying, "Man, I let you hang out with my program for 2 years. What did you learn? Were you paying attention?" Dave Snow, meticulous attention to detail. My goodness, I don't think I was like that. I wish I could have been a little bit more like that. And you mentioned gritty before, he had this aura about him where players bought into what he was saying, and they just fought like crazy for the program, for the team, to win games. Very knowledgeable also, obviously. So yeah, I think I learned a lot just watching those teams play and try to bring some of that. I think you learn a lot from any coach you play for, or you learn, I shouldn't say a lot. You learn more from some than others, but I think you can learn at least one thing from every coach you've ever been around to carry with you and something you want to implement in your program. Dave Snow was a big influence on me. I was only around Lindsey Meggs for 1 year, but when I started out as the head coach, a lot of the things I did, I just copied what he was doing as far as infield, outfield, or drills, or those kinds of things. So I took a lot of that away from coaches that I'd been around.
So, Lindsey Meggs, for those not familiar, Chico State, and then I don't know where he was between, but he
Chico
was
State
the
won. I think he won one or two Division II championship at Chico State. Then he left for Indiana State, a Division I program. Eventually ended up at the University of Washington and actually took Washington to Omaha 1 year. He quote unquote retired from that, but from what I understand, he's helping Rich Hill at the University of Hawaii now. So I think he's actually
Nice.
still coaching.
Why not? Why not? You retire and then go live in Hawaii, coach. There you go.
I think him and Rich Hill were friends from college. They've been friends forever. Yeah.
So you mentioned this like grittiness and getting the guys to buy in. Just remember, I vaguely remember that happening. I was 6, 7 years old. I remember the LB hats and it growing up around the area, the dirt bags, like you hear about it, but I didn't understand until I started watching old videos of his teams in Omaha. And there's like a 5'7" left-handed pitcher flipping in sliders to these absolute monsters from LSU and getting them out. And it was just like this complete, I'm not going to say mismatch, but like you would look at them and be like, no, they shouldn't be here right now. How important do you think that is to a team? Like how far do you think as a coach does that take you if you're a bit outmanned?
It's funny. I don't know if this is negative. I used to believe that more, that it could take you farther than I believe now, but I don't, maybe that's just me. I don't know if that's 100% true. Maybe for me, it just became harder to get individuals and teams to buy in to believing that they could overcome those odds. I think what you're talking about, I don't know if it's no longer called this, but it used to be referred to as West Coast baseball. Small game, pitching location is and execution is more important than straight velocity or break, and just being tough and finding ways to win. Um, and in the United States, I don't know what it's like in Europe, but that form of baseball is dying out over the years because we have so much more access, I think, to the analytics of velocity and movement and spin, and the guys that are getting drafted they're really no longer guys that just got everybody out. Now they have to be guys who can light up those kind of metrics. So I think it's died out a little bit. I don't know if there's a lot of teams still doing that like they used to, but I think having a team like that, and we mentioned that 2006 team that you played on, that team was like that, and it's really fun for everybody when that comes together like that, and that kind of determination and will to win and do it for your teammates, and execution is all there. It's a really fun way to play baseball when it all comes together.
I think that's why we do this in the first place. Really, it's like a social thing. At the end of the day, baseball, you're with teammates and you play. It's an individual sport because you're hitting by yourself and you're pitching by yourself and you're playing shortstop. The ball's hit to you, like no one's going to save you. You got to do it. But it's a team game. And it's interesting you say that. You mentioned that West Coast style baseball kind of dying out. Where do you see it going now? And how's it developed throughout that 32 years?
I was going to say, you mentioned that there was a social piece to a team, or at least to a good team. And for me, and maybe this is why, one of the reasons it's time for me to step away, because obviously there's good coaches that can still pull this off. I think it's harder to do that. John, I think when you came and played for me in the mid 2000s, it was before YouTube and Instagram. And I think when guys like you walked onto a field and started interacting with coaches, if it seemed like the coaches knew what they were doing, those coaches instantly became your baseball guru. And it was like you couldn't wait to go to the field the next day to see what new drill or what new thought he was going to put in our heads. And for me, I think it's been hard to battle the YouTube and Instagram clips that everybody watches every night, because it's become harder for the coaches of the program they're playing in to become their baseball gurus, because they can turn on their phone every night and they can go find 1,000 other gurus to listen to if they want to. So I think in that way it's changed a lot. We literally have guys in our programs that change their batting stance every week. Where'd you get that? I mean, and it's never to the neutral standard position. It's always something on the extremes ends of the spectrum. Where'd you get? And he was watching a guy on YouTube or whatever. And so I think in that manner, it's been difficult for me to adjust to that. How else has it changed? We definitely, at Long Beach City, we don't play the West Coast game as much as we used to, the small ball, or even, or even trying to get these guys to be as gritty and tough as we used to do. And I'm not saying that's something I had to do. Maybe that's something I let happen. I'm not sure. I'll probably be thinking about this for years to come, but that has definitely changed in the way my teams have played. And I think in the way the other teams we play or have been playing, especially, the offensive style, that's changed a lot.
So it's almost like the individual nature of baseball is kind of taken the reins, where we're looking more at technique. We're looking more at just that moment, that isolated event, whether it's hitting, whether it's throwing a fastball, whether it's
throwing a fastball one time.
Yeah.
We had a pitcher on our team this year who came to us. He has a year of JC eligibility left. He came to my pitching coach really and said, okay, I think I'm D1 now. You got to help me get to a D1. Well, what makes you think you're D1? Well, I touched 91 a couple of games ago. His average fastball was still 85, and he had walked more batters than innings pitched. But in his mind, the metrics say that he has earned a spot on D1 now. So, that's been hard for me to coach.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a big adjustment. It kind of ties in a bit with education as well, where maybe the PowerPoint slide and the lecture up there with a PowerPoint presentation isn't cutting it anymore, because all the information's already out there. So it's not even about getting the information, which in 2005, when I first stepped on the field at Long Beach City College,
Right.
I remember the first day of practice, you took us out and started doing base running and said, this is how you take a lead. And I was like, yes, like no one's ever taught me this before. This is awesome. Like, oh man, this is how you read a ball at second base when there's nobody out and a ball's hit at you. Like, this is how you make it behind you. Like, I've been thrown out so many times on stupid ground balls, to the shortstop. Like this, like just that little stuff. It was like classes in session, that now that information's all out there, it's kind of changed the way that the athletes learn. And
I don't think athletes look for that information. I think they only look for hitting and pitching information. I don't know if they look for the little stuff. Maybe they do. I mean, I've already admitted that I'm out of touch with all of this, at least a little bit. So I don't know.
They're focusing more on the bigger parts of the game and those little. Yeah, I just remember when you would go around and you would first base. This is what we do: secondaries, fake steals, delay steals. Here's the technique. This is how you run a 90. Check. This is how. And you take a second base and run us through every scenario. Third base, and it was enlightening. So you're saying that's kind of getting pushed off to the side.
Yeah, I don't even know if I taught that as well at the end as I did when you played here. In fact, I would have my assistant coaches do most of that stuff. It's still important. I mean, 90% of the game is the pitcher against the hitter. And if you win that battle, most of the time you're going to win. But if you make terrible, mistakes, mental mistakes on defense or base running, then it's hard to get over the hump to be the best team or to win championships, win your conference, or go deep into the playoffs. You got to be good at that stuff.
Do you think I might get philosophical here, maybe just ask like a pie in the sky question, but do you think by knowing those things and like executing them and having that a part of your identity, sort of like the West Coast style of baseball, it actually is a placebo effect for when you're at the plate on that one-to-one battle?
I have all this stuff in my back pocket that you don't even know about. Not only that, I think it gives the team confidence that on the day where they're not hitting well, that okay, there's other things we can do to still do this. We get the extra bags when we're on the bases. We can eliminate mistakes that are made. Yeah, I think it gives you this feeling that you're a complete baseball player, and I'm not sure that young people are looking for that these days. Like I said, they want the pitchers want to see what their velocity is, and the hitters, I guess, want to see what their exit velocity is. And I think you've got to have enough energy and passion as a coach these days to still get them to get that other stuff in their back pocket.
Yeah, it's a tough one, coach. It's a tough one. So going back to early days, so you're taking over for Coach Meggs. I didn't get there. So what year is that? 90 or 96?
I guess my first season as a head coach would have been 97.
97. So 1997.
No. I take that back. My first year as the head coach was 94.
94. Okay. So it was another 10 or 11 years until I got there. What was young Coach Crook like? What were the things that you learned? What were some things you had to develop?
I think when most young coaches start coaching, they think I have all this great knowledge and I'm just going to tell it to these guys and then they're going to do it and then we're going to win a bunch of games. And I think it probably took a few years to realize, oh, okay, they don't necessarily always just do what you tell them to do. You do have to you have to hone your art of coaching a little bit. God, I was just reading something in a book today, and basically it said something like, most of education is reminding people of what they already know. It's not telling them something for the first time. And I think, if you're impatient or if you don't understand how this works, you get tired of reminding people of what they're already supposed to know. But I think I got better at that. I think by the time and I got away from this at the end, but you talk about base running. We did base running every single day when you played for me, pretty sure about that. And it just reinforced everything over and over and over again. And I think I got better at that. And I think you still got to, when you do something over and over and over again, you got to do it in a way where hopefully it doesn't get so stale they stop working on it. And I think probably when you played for me, I was doing a pretty good job of that. And I certainly wasn't like that when I started. I was unorganized and stubborn and impatient with these guys that just aren't listening to me, even though, we still won most of our games back in those days. But I think I was definitely a better coach by the time you played for me.
You had some really good teams. You had the team with Ogle and Fern, and was Chav on that team as well?
Right, in 99.
So leading up to the early 2000s, what do you think the big shift was? Was it just getting that experience, or was there like a single moment where you felt that you had figured some things out?
I think that's it. I don't know if I could put my thumb on exactly the thing other than what I've already said, but I don't know. It was tough too. When I took over as head coach, I was 26 years old. So I'm only 5 or 6 or 8 years older than a lot of guys on the team. And I looked like one of them. I was a pretty boyish looking, young looking guy back then. So I looked like one of the players. And, and a lot of them had played on the team the year before where I was the assistant coach. And I think that can be a weird dynamic. But I think I think I got more confident in what I was doing. I don't know that I changed a lot of what I was teaching from the start to say when you played for me, but I got more confident in the things that I saw and knew were going to work and what wasn't going to work. And I figured out how to organize that, I think, daily in practice to get the work done.
So I might ask another question from left field. If you don't have an answer for it, don't we can just move on. But around that same time was when you had your boys, correct?
My children,
Yeah.
my first child was born in the summer of 97. So the first 4 years I coached at Long Beach City College, I was a part-time walk-on coach, and I got married in 95 and I still had this part-time job, and it's tough to hold on to a part-time job after you get married and you start talking about having a family. I actually started as a full-time faculty at Long Beach City College in the 90 97 98. So 98 would have been the first season that I coached as a full-time. So my kids were all born by the year, all three of them were born by 2000.
So
So that's tough too, because now you're dealing with a lot of stuff outside the field for the very first time. It was distracting, I think. I think to at the time, my older brother asked me at the time. He said, "So now you're having kids, like, how's that affecting your baseball coaching?" And I go, "Well, I'm not as good a baseball coach because I'm trying to figure out this dad thing. And I spent a lot of time doing that. But by 2005, my kids were all old enough. You probably remember them running around at the playoff games and hanging out in the dugout. They were old enough that I think it had gotten a little bit easier as a father. So I was probably really settling into the best coaching I ever did, I think, for a stretch anyway.
that's where my mind went when I asked the question, because like you talked about developing patience and things like that. Did teaching and like parenthood help you throughout that process?
Yeah, it's all part of the puzzle, right? I think you're right, though. I mean, having your own kids does teach you more patience. You're right. That probably contributed to, well, for sure, it contributed to who you are as a coach, and I think it affected me positively in that sense that patience. And you start thinking about, how would you want a coach to address your kid or treat your kid and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it probably had a positive influence on me at that time.
So we're in the mid 2000s now, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but I send you that letter, and I don't know if I might have told you this before, but you called me for the very first time and I missed the call. But at the time, I had a rap song as because that was back in the day when you would make a song your voicemail message. And it was a rap song, and it was a really bad one. And it had a lot of bad words, coach, and a lot of things that athletes shouldn't be doing, they were rapping about. And I just remember you said, Jonathan, this is Casey Crook from Long Beach City College. We got your letter, would like to talk to you more. Oh, yeah, and you might want to change your answering machine. And you ended up taking a chance on me. And again, like brought Ryan Averiketh and Mike Caldonado, Hector Padilla later on to come to Long Beach City College, and we ended up winning the whole thing in 2006. '05 was a really good year too. I remember that we were just a bit just came up a bit short of playoffs that year. But what made those two teams, just for my own curiosity, what made those two teams different, '05 and '06?
Oh man, I think there's a lot of factors. I'm sure I've never told you this before, but from you mentioned the 99 team, from 2000 to 2004 was kind of a down stretch for me and the program. We didn't win as much. We weren't making the playoffs. We had some losing seasons. And it coincided with some times at the college where, to tell you the college kind of stopped maintaining the field. We had to start doing most of that ourselves, or more than usual. I had a 100% turnover in assistant coaches for like 3 or 4 years in a row. Just weren't paying them enough. It was hard to keep them around. I actually went to the AD at the end of the 2004 season. I said, "Hey, things aren't going real good, and I really feel like I need more support maintaining the field and with assistant coaches. And anyway, at the time he said to me, well, it's just can't justify putting more support into a program that's not winning. So I took that to heart, tried to do a better job. I stopped making my assistant coaches help me maintain the field. I would just go out there on the weekends and do it all myself, just trying to keep them around. And the worst part of that story is that after we won the state championship, school record for wins, I went back to that same athletic director and I said, well, what about now? And he said to me, well, it looks like you already have enough support to win state championships. He still didn't do anything. So I think a rededication from myself after that conversation I had with the AD. You got to remember the teams you played on, we had some really good assistant coaches. Nate Fernley was the pitching coach for those 2 years, and he's gone on to have a great career. He's one of the best coaches in the state junior college right now. He not only was a good pitching coach, and he recruited some of the best players on those teams, but Nate has a way of his competitiveness rubbing off on the people around him. And so, just having him as part of those coaching staffs was huge. I think you'll remember, having Bob Myers and Chris Kinder, two older guys, but they knew what they were talking about, and they were like father figures for you guys. So assistant coaching staff, I think, for those teams were huge. I think I've never been able to have a great season when the assistant coaching staff wasn't pretty darn good and contributing on their own. The best teams I've ever had assistant coaches that really contributed, not just doing the things I asked them to do, but beyond what I asked them to do. And the assistant coaching staffs really worked hard and did a great job getting it out of the players those years. And then, of course, we had some really good players. There weren't any big leaguers on that team, but there were some really good college players, and they really came together unselfishly to try to win games. I mean, I always kid you about how you probably could have, oughta, should have been the first baseman on that 2006 team, but you recruited a friend of yours to come play who took that spot. Yeah. I mean, that's unselfishness right there. A lot of people would have said, wait a minute, that guy kind of plays the same position I play. I'm not going to ask him to come play on my team. There was a lot of unselfishness. There was a lot of leadership on that team. Tommy Peel is probably as good a player leader of any team that I ever coached here. People followed Tommy. People wanted to do things right because they either knew Tommy was really good and we had a chance to win, or they were kind of scared of Tommy maybe. So he was a good leader on that team.
Yeah, he was, and he ended up going, for the listeners, he was state player and state pitcher of the year. He went 16 wins, no losses, minuscule ERA, and was one of the better hitters in California.
You'll remember this, John, but one of the stories I heard after that season was over from who I don't know who from. It wasn't from Tommy. It was from somebody else on the team. Heck, as far as I know, maybe it was you, but we had a center fielder on that team, Chris Cordova, who was a good player. He was kind of if anybody on that team was a little too cocky and selfish, people might say it was Cordova, at least at the beginning. And I actually flipped the lineup and I took him from leadoff and batted him ninth. And of course, I never knew that Chris quit the team, because from what I heard years later was that Chris quit the team when he got put into the ninth spot in the lineup. But Tommy Peel went and found him off campus at his house, I don't know where, and said, hey, we're going to be really good, and I'm not going to let you quit this team, so you better show up to practice tomorrow. And so I never knew that Chris Cordova quit the team for 24 hours, because he showed up to practice the next day.
Hey, I had no idea either until you told me later. And well, that goes to show, yeah, a great leader. And then the fact that we had a big, flashy, big personality player, and maybe more like a modern day player, to be honest, where he really it was high intent swings and very individualistic. I love Cordova, and he's a great teammate, great guy. But it was more,
There's no way we win a championship if Chris Cordova isn't the center fielder on that team.
he was ahead of his time as far as how he approached the game, in my opinion. And to take him off out of the leadoff and put him ninth, first off, that was a roll of the dice from you. And it paid off. He ended up leading our team in home runs, I'm pretty sure, or he was up there.
I don't know. We only hit like 15. I think,
Yeah,
as
he
I
might have
remember it, that team hit 10 home runs the whole year as a team. And then we hit 5 home runs in the final tournament. I think we ended the season with 15 home runs, and so nobody hit very many home runs on that team.
He was one of the guys in the lineup who could and who really
That's for
wanted
sure.
to.
He played great center field.
He did.
Played unbelievable defense. He could run and throw, and he was tough. Yeah.
So for Tommy to pull him out like that shows the great leadership that we had on the team. And then for him to buy in, for Chris to buy into it and produce in the 9. He didn't go into a hole. He crushed it in the 9 hole. And it was like, it became a part of our identity. Like our one of our best home run hitters tucked away in the 9 hole. It's like, go get a fastball and hit a double off the wall or something, you know? So it just became a part of our identity. And I think it comes down to a bit of self-belief in that team as well, where we had guys who just believed that we could do it. And I think it's a mixture of all the things that you kind of mentioned already. We had support our coaches had our back. We had support. We had good leaders who supported us, and we were up for it. I don't know. We thought we could beat anyone.
Yeah. Chris's personality ahead of its time. I'm not sure that, so I already alluded to the fact Chris bothered me a little bit as a coach. I thought there was some aspects where maybe he was a little tough to coach, but probably the last 5 years he wouldn't have bothered me at all because the game has changed. I mean, I wish we had 9 Cordovas on every team since 2006. We probably would have won some more state championships. I'd like to get it'd have been nice if there'd been some more Cordovas showing up to play for the team. The other thing I was going to say is that team, we talked about West Coast baseball. That team won the regional tournament on a walk-off suicide squeeze bunt. I mean, they could do all those things. And I'm not saying we did those things a lot, but we did them more that year than we've been doing lately in this program. And we could suicide squeeze when we needed to, and we could get a sac bunt down when we needed to. I think in that same inning where we got the walk-off suicide squeeze, I think Mike Caldonato put down a sac bunt. Probably the first time I asked him to put down a bunt the entire year, and he just turned around and put it down like it was no big deal.
Off a lefty who pitched in the big leagues for a while too. Yeah. So yeah, that team, it was almost like a Swiss Army knife, that team. And yeah, that I remember our first fall game that we played. First time we practiced for however many weeks, 6 weeks, and we're creating this identity. And we play Irvine Valley in the fall, and it's like leadoff double. Our 2-hole hitter drops down a drag bunt to get him over, and then we execute like I don't even think it was sac fly. It was just a ground ball up the middle with less than 2 outs to score him, and we just manufactured that run. And we were we loved it. We ate it up.
Well, the strength of that team was pitching and defense.
Yeah, it helps when you can
statistically.
Yeah,
and the offense got better as the year went on, and the best that offense ever played was in the playoffs. So I mean, it was, and it's been a while since my teams lately have been. I mean, statistically, the offense has been the strong part of the team. And I think in order to win championships, that's probably backwards. You got to have strong pitching.
Yeah, team pitching was unbelievable. ERA under 2, like you said. Coach Fernley was the pitching coach. We'll try to get him on in the future because it'd be great to break it down with him. But that pitching staff, it was unbelievable. We ended up going 41 to winning the state championship, winning the whole thing. And it was one of the greatest memories of my life for sure. And an accomplishment that, how many times do you get to play to the last out, it's just unforgettable to be rewarded by the game like that. And it's very rare and special. So yeah, thank you for that, Coach. Thank you for not, ghosting me after you heard the the voicemail. It worked out. So like moving on to the late 2000s, early 2010s. How did your teams develop through there? Were there any identity changes after that state championship? Was there any knock-on effect?
Obviously we had some good teams, and we won a bunch of conference championships, at least, like 2014 to 2022 in there. I guess for me personally, so we talked a lot about Nate Fernley. Nate Fernley left after the state championship year because he got his first head coaching job, and then he's built that into something great since then. And I think the year after that, you never played for him, but I actually got the chance to bring on a coach named Steve Boaz and you worked with him. You never played for him, but when you came back and coached with us, sometimes Steve was there, and I learned as much about coaching and baseball from Steve Boaz. Now, so it's 2028 to 2008, and I am how old am I in 2000? I'm 40 years old, and I'm learning as much about coaching and baseball as I learned from anybody. And I think, and maybe I didn't try hard enough to do this, because I think you can try to do this, like this podcast you're running. That just kind of reinvigorated me. More stuff, learn stuff. There's stuff that, and unfortunately, Steve actually coached with me for, I was it 8 or 10 years, and he passed away. But there's stuff that he brought to that program that I just, it's just a part of the program now, just stuff that makes sense, just good stuff that became a part of the program. So, I mean, that was a really fun time too, because we won more games than we lost, and we won some championships. But, learning from Steve and having him right in there next to me, and then just watching him coach was a lot of fun.
So it was 2011 was my first year coaching, and being around you and Coach Boaz, it was the best place I could be, for sure. Can you tell the listeners who Steve Boaz is?
Steve Boaz, first of all, the thing you got to know about Steve Boaz is that he's literally 5 feet tall, had some health issues his entire life. His career is he started coaching with John Herbold, who is a legendary baseball coach in the cities of Long Beach and Lakewood, and spent a lot of time with him. He managed to hook on with Andy Lopez, another legendary NCAA coach who was coaching at Cal State Dominguez, and Steve was with him for a long time, all the way through his national championship. When Andy Lopez was the head coach at Pepperdine, Steve Boaz was calling pitches in Omaha. I mean, just a jack of all trades coaches. When Andy Lopez moved on to Florida, Steve, I think, kind of had to make the decision to stay in Long Beach, to stay living here, as much for his health as anything. And so he coached with a couple different high schools, and Steve could be confrontational. Steve could be controversial, especially with high school parents and kids. So he eventually kind of got moved out of coaching at the high school level, and I think 1 or 2 years after he had got done coaching at high school, and I knew him a little bit. We'd bump into each other around at baseball games, and I was, I guess, at least in terms of building an assistant coaching staff, I hadn't settled on anything. I was kind of floundering a little bit. So it was a couple years after that state championship, and all the assistant coaches from that state championship team were gone, and Steve was no longer coaching in high school. I just said, "Hey, one day, you want to come out?" Assistant coaches at junior colleges they don't make hardly nothing. They probably make 25 cents an hour for all the time they put in. And Steve was in the right spot. I'm not saying he didn't make money coaching here, but he didn't really need to make a lot of money financially, and he lived down the street. And so he came and coached with me for 8 or 10 years. He always used to tell me, "I've been coaching at Long Beach City College for, straight through a longer period of time than any other place I coached. And so, and I think I got an older, mellower version of Steve Boaz, but he was still, he told things like they were. He was very blunt. He always used to say, I like to tell the truth. My experience with Steve was the players that really wanted to be good loved playing for Steve Boaz. And the players that were just kind of hanging on or weren't sure how important this was to them, they hated playing for Steve Boaz because he would put it back on them. He had some great lines.
What a guy. And you mentioned that about him and the high school parents. There's a saying out here. I don't know if it exists in America, but it's like it'd be like chalk and cheese. Steve Boaz and high
I don't
school.
know what that means.
It's just a bad combination.
Oh, chalk and cheese.
Chalk and cheese, like just an awful combination. Because you're right, he didn't play that game. He didn't play the game. He said it exactly how it was, and as a young coach, I needed to hear that. I remember I would apply for a job, right? This assistant coaching job's come up. I think I could really get it, coach. And he'd look at me and go, it's a big world out there, John.
I wish I had been more blunt with my players over the last few years. I think that's something I probably got away from that would have not only helped the team, but I think it would have helped some of these young guys that maybe we didn't get the most out of these last few years.
So going into the early 2000s, really good teams when I was coaching there with Coach Boaz. We had some successful teams that didn't really quite get there, but then in 14, 15, 16, the whole you won we won what?
I think it was 4 conference championships in a row.
So a lot of conference championships, some really good teams, some really good players as well, just some really good people. But you mentioned maybe you weren't as blunt with these teams in the last few years. A theme that we've explored on this podcast is like that balance of challenge and support. So challenging your players and being blunt with them, but also supporting them and being there for them and getting that balance right. Because if you have challenge with no support, then it's going to be a train wreck. And if you have just support with no challenge, it's going to go the opposite direction. So, how do you challenge these guys? Has it changed throughout the years?
I think it changed in my head. I think, to tell the truth, I think that, okay, well, I've already established like maybe this last season wasn't the greatest season we ever had. And there's some talented guys on this last team that just, from my view, just didn't get it. And I think in my head, it was like, well, you can't challenge these guys as much as you used to back in the day. So, but that might be the biggest reason why maybe I didn't get through to them. Like I said, I wish I had challenged them. But I think the balance, like you're talking about, I think there's a smaller margin of error than there used to be. Like you can lose them quicker than you used to when you challenged them. Challenge doesn't always mean like in your face challenge. It can be measured. It can be temperate. I think even the measured challenges, just they don't respond. They don't come back the next day trying to either accomplish what you've challenged them for, or even just trying to prove you wrong. They just feel like you're against them. And I think that support piece, I think you've got to like pretty much do it at the same time now in order to really get it out of them. And I think that's, like I said, I think that's something that at the end maybe I wasn't doing too well. And I wouldn't say it's all because players have changed, even though I think they have a little bit. You got to change with the times. You still have to have the passion and the energy to do all that.
It takes a lot of energy because, well, we're talking more teams because, I mean, you've been coaching for 32 years. So we've got 32 teams to talk about, really. But at the end of the day, the individuals on the individual level requires its own challenge and support balance.
Yeah, I've always thought that you're only going to coach your best if you're truly doing it for the players, if you're trying to keep pushing them even individually. towards the right places. And if you take a look in the mirror and you're not necessarily doing that, you need to get back on that, because it's pretty easy, I think, as a coach to go back and forth between, I'm doing this for the players, I'm going to challenge and support that player because he needs it, man, he's got to figure this out. And then also, but it's easy to go, my team needs to win games, I need to impress my bosses, and do it for other reasons. And I think when you're doing it for other reasons, that even when you win games, it doesn't really come out quite right.
It is a delicate balance. We've had quite a few baseball guys on here, but we've also had a football coach, a soccer coach, a sports psychologist, a rugby coach, and that's just been the theme is challenging the players and pushing them. As an educator, you've got Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, right? Just outside their comfort zone, but not too much to where they go off the rails and start adapting really negative stuff like anxiety. But like how to get there, you said it, coach, that zone of development, it's getting smaller. You can't really miss these days too much.
It's funny, your support and challenge thing, I just reminded me of, and not that I ever forgot it, but my grandfather, who was a high school dropout from Montana, when I told him one day that I wanted to be a teacher and a coach, he told me two things. He said, okay, number one, just remember there's no such thing as a bad kid, just bad situations. And then the next thing he's told me is, but don't ever let them tell you that they don't know the difference between right and wrong. So right and wrong, there's the challenge part. No, don't take any guff from these kids. Don't take any crap. Challenge them, as you know what you're supposed to do. But then on the other hand, there's the support piece. Don't give up on a kid. Keep trying to help them, because there's no such thing as a bad kid.
I like that. And would you say that's been kind of the backbone of because I've seen you coach, and when you mentioned when you were a young coach and you thought you had it all in your head and you were just going to put it in their head. That's how I was too, for sure. And you saw that in me. And there would be a lot of times where I'd be really impatient with players and be like, oh, forget him. He's done. And you'd give them more of a chance, and you'd be really patient with them. They're endless examples.
Well, the other thing is where we're at, a junior college. I don't know if it translates to what happens in Europe, but a junior college is kind of a place for second chances, for first, second, and third chances for these student athletes. So if you're not going to be patient with not just the on the field stuff, but the academic stuff and the character stuff and the citizen stuff, if you're not willing to give them second and third chances, then you're probably in the wrong place.
And to be a part of that and see do it, to be an example of it, because you could have easily, like I said, you could have heard that voicemail and said, nope.
Let's not start telling John Rodriguez story. You might lose your viewership.
Yeah, we'll keep that on the low. Yeah, we weren't that 2016 great on the field. Off the field, we probably caused more headaches. But yeah, it's great to be. It was great to be a part of, and it was great to watch you and be a part of. The coaching staff and watch you do it from the dugout and on a daily basis for 5 years, and it was an honor, coach. Because yeah, you impacted 32 years, 32 teams, 25, 30 guys a team. Do the quick maths, and that's quite an impact that you've had. So yeah, thank you. I have one final question for you about the career and the baseball stuff. If we've gone through like the timeline a bit, if you were going to describe the prototypical Casey Crook team, how would you describe it? With your stamp, your identity on it.
Always challenge my teams to be hard to score on, pitching and defense. I've already alluded that my last few teams haven't necessarily been like that. We've gotten away from that, I think, but I always wanted to be known as a team that was hard to score on. And then I think the best teams I ever had were hard to score on, and they were scrappy and tough. I used to I used to different times. I used to show my teams. I don't know if I ever did this when you were around, but I would show my teams. There's a scene in every Rocky movie where the bad guy knocks him down and he thinks the match is over, and he starts strutting around the ring, holding his arms up like, okay, I'm won. He's down. This is over. And of course, behind him, Rocky is managing to climb up the ropes and stand back up. And the guy turns around and he sees Rocky standing there, and the look on his face is like, oh crap, is this guy never going to go away? And I've challenged my teams off and on to be that guy, be the team that just looks like they're never going to go away. We didn't have a great year this year, but we managed to make the playoffs, and we lost the first game of the series. The second game of the series, we were down 9-0, and we won 11-9 on a walk-off bomb in the bottom of the ninth inning. So even this team, and we lost, and then we lost the third game. But even this team that, off and on, this team managed to do that. 9-0 early.
Wow, 11-9. So you just shut them out and clawed 11 runs on them in a playoff game.
It's so much fun. We had this pitcher who only pitched out of the pen for us, and he got in there and he shut him down for 4 or 5 innings or something. Just pitched the best game of the season for him. My pitching coach is like, I don't know if we can send him back. We're going to send him back out there till he gives up a run. Let's ride this guy. If he's doing it, let's let him keep doing it. This is the most innings he pitched all year, and he pitched great, and we managed to come back and win.
I know we talked about a lot of offensive stuff, but we spent a lot of time on defense, and we were really tough to score against the teams that I played for, the teams that I coached, and especially the early days when I was coaching. We didn't have great offenses, so games were 3-1, 2-0, and we were just on a thread the whole time defensively. And yeah, we can throw the ball, we can field the ground ball, but those things like holding runners on second base and the pickoff system and just those little things that we hammered, it was just made us tough to score against.
And just going back to a question you asked earlier about how has it changed, and I guess I've kind of exuded to the fact that it's gotten frustrating for me and all that. I think, and I've pretty much always, there's only been a couple teams where I tried to coach my own pitching. I didn't have a pitching coach. For the most part, my philosophy as a head coach has been, man, if your assistant coaches are willing to come out here and coach for almost nothing, then let them coach. And I've obviously had some really good coaches, and my pitching coaches the last few years have been good coaches. But the most frustrating position for me, I think the biggest change is in pitching. I think it has become very, very difficult to teach pitchers the importance of executing a pitch, which really means locating your pitches in places where they're, number one, strikes, but number two, hard to hit. They're all just chasing that velocity number, or even in this day and age, when you're getting your pitchers to execute pitches, you're doing a really good job of coaching these days, because I think it's become more and more difficult to get them to believe in the importance of that.
There have been some really good pitchers that have come through Long Beach City College. What are some of the best traits, not so much stuff-wise, but getting into the mental game and the psychological game and whatnot? What were some of the things that they had?
Well, I think the whole concept of this is good for any athlete in any sport, in any position, but the whole concept of the last pitch is over, I'm focusing on the next pitch. The last at bat is over, the last inning's over, I'm focusing on the next one. I think seems like we've had a lot of, especially pitchers lately, who they get in there and everything's working for a couple innings, and then all of a sudden the 10th batter they face just mashes one off the wall. And then it's panic time. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, it's not working anymore. I got to change everything. I got to throw harder. I need to stop throwing my fastball. I need to, this whole idea of the know and the trust, right? When you're a mature athlete, what you know never gets too far away from what you trust. An immature athlete, they know that if they throw strikes and keep the ball down and stay ahead of the count, that good things are going to happen. And they trust that. But then when a guy hits the ball off the wall, all of a sudden what he knows and what he trusts are a million miles apart, and they start changing everything. But a mature athlete, okay, even after that guy hits the ball on the wall, off the wall, what he knows and what he trusts are still right there working together. And I definitely, that's a tough one for especially pitchers now. I think that, it's just such a bad trait to, when you give up that one big hit, that you think you need to change everything. They don't recognize that they just threw a 3-1 pitch fastball, half speed, right in the middle of the strike zone. They don't recognize that. They're telling, I got to stop throwing fastballs, or I need to throw harder, or whatever. No, just go back to what you've been practicing. Trust what you know and know what you trust. Just stick with it. Next pitch.
The gap. So, wow. The gap between know and trust.
The gap between mature athletes, the gap between what they know and their trust never get too far apart. They can get back to, they can trust what they know. They can get back to trusting what they know, which is true in other parts of life too, whether it's the relationships you have with people, or your religious faith, or whatever it is. If you're mature and you believe, then this gap never gets very big. But the immature, like I've already said it, but the immature athlete or the immature person, if something bad happens in their relationship with a family member, all of a sudden this big split happens. Or, and in baseball, for a pitcher, every pitching coach in the world gets them in the bullpen, and they're working on keeping the ball down and throwing to both sides of the plate, and being able to throw your fastball all over the strike zone, and being able to throw your off-speed pitches in and out of the zone. And they practice it and practice it and practice it. And more often I see the guy who gives up that ball off the wall just totally go away from trusting it. He still knows it. He still knows that he's supposed to keep the ball down and be able to throw his off-speed pitches in and out of the zone. But just one hit, just one at-bat in a game can make him not trust it anymore.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the psychological skills that would be attached to that. Mental toughness, number one. Resilience, where, the known, the trust, the play might be a bit of resilience. That's incredible, Coach. I love that.
Well, it's it's this part of it is this belief you're only good if you totally dominate. And what's the old saying in in baseball? It's not an old saying, but you look at a line score and you see a guy through 7 shutout innings, and you assume that he completely dominated. But you have to dig into the game to see that, the bases were loaded with 1 out in the 4th after he walked 2 guys, and that the bases were loaded again in the 6th with 1 out when he gave up 3 missiles in a row, but he still got out of those innings for a shutout. He didn't totally dominate. They should have scored 4 runs off of him. And I think young, immature pitchers we're talking about in particular, if things don't go perfectly right for them, then they give up. They get away. They stop trusting what they're supposed to do, and they don't get out of those innings because it spirals on them.
Yeah, when do they learn? I guess it takes time. You're at a junior college. You're dealing with freshman and sophomore college athletes, so you never get the junior and senior that figure it out.
I've used this. I watched this. I couldn't tell you what year it was, but I'll use it now because it happened in the Open Championship, the golf tournament. I don't know which course in England or Scotland it was played on. I can't remember the year, but I remember the name, Jean Van de Velde, the Frenchman. No Frenchman's ever won a major championship. And Jean Van de Velde, I've told this story to my team. You imagine as a golfer standing on the putting green at your local course practicing, making the 6-foot putt to tie the tournament and go into extra holes, and you pump your fist. Yeah, John Vandevelde was standing on the tee of the 72nd hole with, I got to make up some of these numbers, but with like a 3 or 4 stroke lead. And he totally screwed the hole up. Bad tee shot into the water, drops. And he made a 6-foot putt at the end to stay in a tie to go into extra holes. And I'll never forget watching him pumping his fist on that green like that hole had gone exactly the way he planned. I think most of us would have put our head down and said, oh, screw that up. And he was already thinking about, he didn't win the championship, by the way, but his body language said he was already thinking about it or the last hole, and he was already thinking about the next one because he was super excited to go into a playoff at the Open Championship. I mean, that to me, that's the epitome of, next swing, next hole, putting it behind you. So a good pitcher, when they give up that ball that gets hit off the wall, they just put it behind them. They go into holding a runner at second base mode and executing pitches to get the next guy out. There's too many guys thinking, oh my God, I'm in trouble now because I screwed it up. They're playing not to lose instead of playing to win.
So we had a former legend. His name's Aaron Takis. He came on a couple episodes ago, and he's been playing pro ball for the last 5 years. And he called it delusional self-confidence. You almost have to have delusional self-confidence, which I think if you want to break it down, it's just having trust in what you know really close together.
Hey, at the heart of sports psychology, it might be delusional self-confidence. Self-confidence, no matter what. No matter what. I'm going to be confident in what I do. I think that's special. That's a special thing to have.
It just goes into what you do and teaching, like I said, freshmen and sophomores who have maybe didn't get into that 4-year that they wanted to get into, or didn't get those grades that they needed to get to go to that 4-year, and you're taking them and you're building up their confidence again over 2 years and sending them back out. And it goes to show the impact, it's
hopefully.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Coach, I think an amazing conversation taking us through everything and really breaking down the ebbs and flows of baseball really over the last 32 years, and deep diving what's gone on at Long Beach City College. We end the Coaching Union podcast with a lightning round. Have you ever heard of Eric Cressey?
I know the Cressey name.
Yeah, he's the S&C guy from the Yankees. So he has a podcast and he does a lightning round, and I stole the idea from him. So I got to give him credit every episode. Shout out Eric Cressey. First question is always a book that you would recommend to every coach.
I don't have a one book. My reading history is reading a lot of books that have nothing to do with coaching or baseball. I will say this, that often I'm reading a book where I find a nugget that I want to share with the team for whatever reason. And I have found those nuggets in War and Peace, Don Quixote, Frankenstein. It's a pretty common practice for me now in my classes to have my class read the chapter from White Fang called The Clinging Death, and then talk about what that means to them and their goals and their direction in life as a college student trying to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. But I fail. I can't answer the question, one book that would be specifically good for young coaches.
Remember the White Fang? You might have told the story maybe to the team at one point, no? Or maybe to me.
I think I've used it mostly in classes that I teach on campus, but I think I have used it with the baseball team off and on, yes.
So what's the story? Can you paraphrase it, or can you give us the gist of it?
Okay, well, in White Fang is about a dog who gets traded around to different owners, and at one point in his life, he's owned by a guy that makes him into a dog fighter that people bet on. He wins all his fights, but he ends up being matched up against an English bulldog who he can't beat. The English bulldog, they both win fights in different ways. The way the English bulldog wins its fights is it gets a hold of your neck and clamps down and crushes your windpipe. Well, in this chapter, and none of the dogs die, by the way, in the end, but in this chapter, the bulldog gets a hold of White Fang around the neck area, but not on the windpipe. It's not where he needs to go. And the moral of the story, the bulldog never lets go of the first grip that he gets, never lets go, inches his way, readjusts his bite, inches his way towards the ultimate goal, which is how he wins fights and kills the other dog. And I've just always used that because I think young people, I think especially young people in college, they will say, I want to go to college, or I want to be a great baseball player. And then they'll say, man, I'm really tired. I want to take a break from that. And then I'll come back to it. And the point I try to emphasize is, no, if you have a goal, you have to take a bite and never let go. You have to hold on for dear life while you make small incremental progresses towards your ultimate goal. But once you let go, there's a good chance you'll never start all over again.
Well, it comes down to and I can't believe I asked it. I haven't asked it. Maybe this could be the next question. The hold the rope story.
You want me to tell the hold the rope story?
Can you? That'll be the second lightning round question. Can you tell the
Well,
hold
it's
on?
not too lightning because it's a long run. You want me to tell the whole story?
I mean, maybe.
Okay, so I'll
maybe
do it
give a little background. A little
I'll do
background.
it as fast as I can. You know, when you're coaching, you try to teach about a little bit more than just trying to win a baseball game. And I think as a coach of young men, you try to help them along their path to becoming good young men, you know, self-supporting, productive members of society, the kind of person that other people can rely on. In the 90s, I went to a baseball clinic where I heard Skip Bertman speak, and we talked about Dave Snow being one of the iconic coaches of college baseball in the 90s, but Skip Bertman might have been the coach of the 90s in college baseball in America. And he said in his individual meetings with players, he used to pull a rope out of his desk, throw it over the desk and say, okay, hold on to the rope like you're hanging off a 200-foot cliff. And then he would ask them, who on this team would you want holding on to my end of the rope? So that led to a discussion of what makes a good teammate and what makes a leader and what are your responsibilities to other people, primarily your teammates. And I took that a little bit further, and I started telling players that the reason you're playing baseball here, nobody's going to remember if we win championships or not. But if you can take a step in your journey to becoming a person that can hold on to the rope for others, I would tell them, you've been hanging off the cliff your whole life. Your parents have been on top like a movie with their heels dug into the dirt, just holding onto that rope while you're dangling off the cliff. They never let you fall. Someday you have to be that person for your siblings, for your parents, for your wife, for your kids. That's what we're practicing here, you know, not just how to hit a ball, but also how to be reliable, how to be trustworthy, how to be somebody that can hold on to the rope for others when they need you to. Okay, so I told that story to a team in 99, and we were struggling one time. I threw a rope over the back of the backstop. They grabbed the rope, pulled me up the backside of the backstop, and I didn't let go till I was standing on the roof of this backstop, looking down. They were all holding the rope, looking up at me. My hands were bleeding because it had been scraped across the dugout. And I had them go out and actually do a bunch of running. They had to, everybody on that team had to say something that we need to improve on. And then they had to run down and back. Nobody was allowed to let go of the rope the whole time.
Do you still have the rope?
I think it's in two pieces now. I still have that rope somewhere. It's pretty old and phrased now, but, so that team ended up winning 16 of its next 17 games, and we made a good run in the playoffs and came kind of close to going to the final. So then 15 years after that, I've told you this part, right, John? 15 years after that season, one of the players on that team who, to tell you the truth, he was a left-handed pitcher who never really pitched for us. By the time he showed up in the fall after we recruited him, he had a bad left arm and he had a pregnant girlfriend. So he never really pitched for us, but he was on that team. He did play some first base. He could hit a little bit. At the end of that season, he told me he was going to quit playing baseball. He had a job lined up. He had a kid by now. He was going to go marry that girl, his high school sweetheart, and he was going to go start a family. I said, that's Probably the right decision. Okay, good luck. 15 years later, this guy shows up at a game and he's standing down there. I'm coaching third base between innings. I go, hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. How you doing? Tells me about his family, married the girl. They got a bunch of kids now. Oh, great. Thanks for coming to the game. Well, about 30 or 45 minutes after the game ended, I was sitting in the dugout talking to assistant coaches, and one of my players came in and said, hey, there's somebody out here waiting to talk to you. And it was this guy, and he had one of his children with him. And he said, yeah, coach, I just got to tell you something. You wouldn't know this, but a few years ago, I was in a terrible car accident and it was bad. I woke up actually, I didn't wake up in the hospital. I was having an out of body unconscious experience in the hospital room. Like you see in the movies. I was looking down from the ceiling. I saw myself all strapped into all this stuff. And the doctor in the corner of the room was telling my wife and my parents that it's over. You better prepare for the worst. And he said, coach, my wife and kids needed me. I couldn't leave my wife and kids. So I just started saying over and over in my head, hold on to the rope, hold on to the rope. Oh my God, the rope. He said, coach, I willed myself to live for my wife and kids, just telling myself to don't let go. So now I tell that story to guys who are on that team. I just ran into the right fielder from that team a couple of years ago at a high school game. He was there watching his buddy's kid play in the game. And we got all caught up. How's life going for you? How's your family? Da, da, da. And conversation went silent like it does, conversations do. And then he looked at me and said, hey, coach, do you remember hold on to the rope? And I said, Juan, yes, I do. And here's the rest of the story. And then, and of course he gets goosebumps and chills.
Hold on to the rope. I didn't know. You didn't tell me that about the player from that team. That I didn't know that one. But you talk about, like we talked earlier about the buy-in of the players. That rope brought some people together. One of the teams we had used to carry it around. It was heavy. It wasn't
I've had players make little pieces of rope for everybody on the team, and everybody was required to keep it in their bag or keep it in their back pocket. I think that's a testament. I think lots of times, and even in the full story, Skip Bertman felt this way. You throw things out there as a coach or a teacher or in any relationship, and like a parent to a kids, and you don't know what's going to stick. And when you think it's not sticking, you think about not throwing stuff out there anymore. But here's this guy who only played on the team 1 year, and 15 years later, he came back, and who knew that day and that story stuck in his head like that. So I guess, one thing young coaches ought to be, if they think they got something good, they ought to keep throwing it out there and see if it sticks.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen. You never know. It's that's the beauty. We can't predict the future, and the impact of a coach and what we do for these guys. Coach, I think we'll I don't know. So I had 3 lightning round questions.
Go ahead.
The second one was going to be so you're from Pullman, Washington, Washington State University. Who's on your Mount Rushmore for Washington State sports for the Cougars?
Mount Rushmore
for Cougars.
Man, you got to understand, I grew up in an age, I would probably put guys on there that you've never even heard of. Jack Mooberry, the longtime track coach, I used to walk by his house going to and from elementary school. I believe the track is named after him. My dad worked in the athletic department when I was a young guy. He was the business manager for the athletic department. So we would walk by Coach Mooberry's house, and him and his wife would be there, and he would do magic tricks, and he was already retired, and his wife would give us cookies. Oh, yeah.
Jack Mooberry.
Bobo Brayton, the legendary baseball coach.
Yeah.
He used to come out. We lived out in the country. He used to bring his hay baler to our house and bale our hay. I think that George Raveling as a basketball coach when I was a kid was just, back in the day, you'd see him around town. My dad actually sold him life insurance, I think, when I was a kid. You got to interact with them a little bit. So these are going way back. These are guys going way back to the 70s and 80s. Favorite players, John Olerud. I actually got to play some baseball one summer with him. I was just watching a clip today on Wade Boggs. and I don't remember what year it was, but it was during one of his at bats in a televised game, and they were saying that he had he had swung at he'd seen over 2,000 pitches so far that season, and he'd swung and missed 26 times. I played with John Olerud one summer, and a scout from the Blue Jays. This was in Alaska and Hawaii and all over the place. And a scout from the Blue Jays just came to every single one of our games. And I heard a stat at the end of that summer saying that John Olerud had swung and missed less than 10 times the whole summer. So John Olerud was a great player, super nice guy, great guy. And then I guess the final one is I'll put my dad on there because he played football and baseball at Washington State University. So I'll throw him on there.
There we go. Nice. Coach, thank you so much for the time, but thank you so much for everything.
Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you in the program as a player and a coach.
It's given more than I could even describe or imagine. I wouldn't be here where I was right now unless I wasn't on the field at Long Beach City College, hadn't played for Coach Myers, who then introduced me to Ray Brown, who then got me to Australia. Fast forward, I now live in England. Yeah, and that's, I'm sure that there are many stories like that from your 32 years of coaching. So on behalf of a player and a coach from the program, thank you for everything that you've done.
Oh, you're welcome.
Right on, Coach. Usually at the end, we give out social media handles if anyone's interested in following your journey. Do you have Twitter or X?
There's no point in following me on social media. I think that's one of the reasons it's time for me to get out, because I'm not on all of that stuff.
We'll get some good video. Where are we going first? Are we going Grand Canyon? What's the first vacation?
Right now, I think my wife and I are gonna go spend like most of a week in Cambria, California. Okay. And just do some stuff up around the Central Coast there. And I think next spring break, I've never had a spring break before as a student or a coach. And I think next spring break, I think we're going to hit Zion National Park, and who knows what's going to happen after that.
There we go. Nice one, Coach. Well, you enjoy the time. You earned it. Thanks for everything.
All right. Thank you, John.
Yeah.